I'm going to make an eyeball, a rotating eyeball, an animated eyeball. I start with the pupil. The pupil will be black. The pupil will have a white highlight in the center. Um, this black sheet I stretch out. I put pressure on with my fingertips to push out the clay, so it becomes thinner and thinner. Eventually I get a sheet I can move from this sort of a sheet to this kind of the size of a sheet. I'll take a piece of this and roll out a little bit of white clay. This is the highlight in the eye. I put the clay in the thin sheet of black, like that. And this is the center highlight. I'll wrap up the black like this, add a little bit of extra white as a secondary highlight. This would be a thin sheet of white. And I'm going to put it, let's see, about right here. And I keep wrapping that up. This is pigs in a blanket with an extra bit of lettuce wrapped into it. I roll it out, and this is the highlight that's the center highlight, and then the sort of echo highlight. That's the hot dog in the blanket, and that's the echo that wraps around it. So this will be the center of the eye. Then I take pieces of stripes of clay that are colorful, and you can choose any kind of colors you want. These are just sheets of clay taken with a pasta grinder, a pasta press, and flattened out to be straight. As you continue to put them through a pasta press, or use the flat of your hand, you can either press it out with your fingers, or you can roll it out with your hand. You can make something that's this thick into something that's this thick. The clay will pressure its way down into being thinner and thinner sheets. Once you've made something, started off with thicker sheets of color like this, they go down to thinner sheets of color like this, and you can get them even thinner. And here's a good example. And then you'll want to take these thin lines of clay, of sandwich, really compact sandwich colors. And you want to cut or slice open little rectangular tubes. And these are going to get wrapped around this center core of the eye, kind of like that. It's a spiral pattern. You try to keep the lines as straight to the lines as straight to the axis, the center axis, as you can, because even though they're rolling around it, you don't want the lines to be, you don't want to lay them in like this or like that. You want to keep them as 90 degrees to the center of this spindle of what you're making. This is going to be the iris, the animated iris of the eye. Here are other examples I've made. What's unique about an eyeball is you're going to do half of the iris this way, and you're going to cut more of the rotating, radiating sandwich color lines. Cut more of these little long, very long tile pieces, and you'll lay them in the intervening gaps, the places where there is no color. You lay these, another rotating, wrapped sheet of color around, like that. A extruded sandwich tube of color. And finally, you are pretty close to having the center part of your eyeball done. There. Okay. Let me get a knife. All right, here we go. These lines will be spindling around very rapidly now because that's their animation angle, and the center will stay, the highlights will stay fairly consistent to where they are. If you want to, you can add a kind of a drop shadow to the iris and pupil. You're going to add a little white now to this. What I like to do at this stage is actually make this much smaller because it's kind of thick and large. So here I'm going to add a couple of drop shadows to it, clear a little room, and begin to roll this out. Now you can still see a little bit of the patterning that's buried now inside the eyeball, or inside the iris and pupil. As I put pressure on it and I extrude it, I'm also now going to twist a little bit, because the longer you push it out, the more gentle the rotation animation has become inside, buried inside it. So I'm going to want to twist just a little bit like this, boom, 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 to keep the rotation strong enough that it's animating fairly rapidly. That the spindle, the spokes on the wheel, these are actually spokes on a wheel. Here, I'm going to cut it off again so you can kind of see it more clearly. These are all spokes on a wheel rapidly rotating around. Those spokes stay rapid. The reason I'm miniaturizing now, I'm miniaturizing the pupil and iris by extruding it out, by rolling it. It's getting thinner and thinner. Then I'll want to go ahead and twist it one more time to make sure that the spinning of what's going on in the center is still rapid enough. At about this point, I would want to add the whites of the eyes. These will be triangles of white. We're going to go on both sides of this tube. Doesn't have to be a lot of white, just a little. I try to create the concave, the circular part of the white that will dovetail into the eyeball itself, the ball part. All right. That's probably this is a still probably too much white. Let me get it down to a reasonable small amount. It's going to be the whites of the eyeball on one side, and the whites of the eyeball on the other side. When you slice it, this will be that's the full basic shape. Finally, you can kind of see a form coming out of it. Now, this is a straight eyeball looking straight at you. If you want to have the eyeball looking from side to side, then you need to animate in motions of movement for the eyeball. I'm going to have it move quickly. Eyeballs tend to move pretty fast. When they move, they don't take a lot of time to move. Now the key here is, though, that I've distorted this movement shape to be a little skinnier in order for when it's cut, it's pre-distorted to allow for when it's to be cut, it to come out still as a circle again. If I were to cut this without pre-distorting, without actually minimizing this profile shape as it moves, it would become very oval shape in moving this direction. Motion and shape are intimately intertwined when you're time sculpting a block like this. I'm going to let this be circular. So this part's circular from here to here. This part has a pre-distortion in it. And I'm going to have the eyeball move back. I need to pre-distort it again, because go the other direction. It comes to a pause. Have it move back one more time. And then lastly, it's going to stay straight. So this is going to be an eyeball looking left, an eyeball looking right, and an eyeball coming back to its main position. So the whites of the eyes that go on either side of this eyeball are pretty clear when it's in the straight position. It gets a little more interesting when it moves to one side or the other. So I will do the straight position first, because it is the easiest. Now, using this as a shape, what I don't want is this general outline, this almond football shape. I don't want that to change, so I'm going to work off that shape and fill in the white that belongs on both sides of this moving eyeball. It fills in the area where the eyeball isn't. And then I'm going to go ahead and just cut away to make a consistent shape. On both sides. I really truly want the eyeball to be a little bit more I want this white, see this white is very flat here. I want it to be, oh, and I have to fill it in on this side too. It didn't really get a good seal. So let me fill it in here. I'm going to go ahead and carve away both sides, so the almond football shape of the whites of the eyes remains on both sides. Great. So, that's your basic, this is the beginning part of the eyeball. That's the basic piece. Now, the interesting start, what do you build around it becomes very interesting. The first thing you want to do is create tubes of eyelash. This is eyelash. I'm going to go ahead and use Caucasian skin tone with black hair lines. These pieces have been made by using a pasta roller to press out the flesh color and the black eyelash color. Then you put the series of these pieces together to make a sandwich, and that sandwich makes then these long tube lines again, much like we did with the colorful inside. We're making colorful sandwiches of just two colors now. This will be the eyelash color. What's interesting about the eyelash color is that you can now squeeze that down to be even tighter, of course. And by tighter, I mean you use the side of your hand, and you can actually roll out the clay to stretch it to be smaller and smaller. Use your fingers, use the side of your hand again, and it makes what were very, very thick colors into very, very thin sandwich colors. And eventually you can get it down to be this thin. Now you'll notice that it looks very, very dense when you look at it from the side, but actually when you cut it, it looks about twice as fat, and that's the key of pre-distortion. This is going to be an animated eyelash. If I were to put the eyelashes on this going this way, there would be no animation at all. What I prefer to do is put the eyelashes on at a diagonal, and that way the eyelashes are also moving. The center of the eye will be like a spoke in a wheel. The spindle will be moving around and animating. The eye itself will be looking one way, looks over to the left, it looks over to the right, comes back to the center. I'm going to add blinks in a little bit later. The key to creating this kind of a shape, which is a good eyelash shape, is to, again, get this as skinny as possible, because when it's put on a diagonal, it will look fatter again. When I cut it at 45 roughly, and I begin to stack this 45. And the key to any kind of texture stacking in Strata Cut is to take the back angle of the either side of this geometric piece and cut a straight line, take this triangle and reaffix the triangle onto that side. That allows it to be a much more workable piece of animation. This is more animated eyelash color. Of course, it's too thick. I'm going to take this block, which I've already created. You can see how I got to that point. I'm going to cut it to be very skinny now, very thin. These parts are fairly chewed up, so I may have to actually have to throw away the middle part of one of these first cuts, because this middle part looks sort of rough and ragged and useless. So I'm just going to get rid of that. Put these two pieces together. This finally forms what will be the eyelash. Blinking, this eyelash will be animated throughout. In fact, I'm going to cut more slices to show you the full length of the eyelash. I'm going to do a top and bottom eyelash, and then I'm going to do a little eyeliner as well. Here is the top eyelash. It's all animated left to right or right to left. So now we have our little football-shaped oval eyeball. We have our eyelash ready to put in, but what we don't have is our eye blinks. Eye blinks are fairly simple. They're just a simple wedge that you take out of the top and bottom, slice it out, get rid of the clay that's inside, and this is going to be filled in with eyelash color first, and then flesh color after that. So I'm going to go ahead and put in several eye blinks, because eye blinks are fun to watch. They're part of the excitement of the animation. The positions usually when I would put an eye blink in would be in a transition. Like ideally the eye blinks might want to have actually been here and here, but here I'm putting them on the actual pivot point. So when it's fully here or fully there, I'm putting it in places where it would... here, I'm going to go ahead and put it in the middle, in the transition point this time. Alright, so we have... I'll put a very slow eye blink. Now this one was deeper and longer than these other blinks, and that makes it slower. It's just the way animation works. I'm going to put a little bit of eyeshadow before I put the eyelash color in. I'm going to put some eyeshadow on. Okay, the eyeshadow is as thin of a black piece of clay as I can press mold it out to be. And I'm going to put a little bit on the bottom, a little bit on the top. I try to put it on one side of the eye because you don't want a fully blacked out eyelash color. You want just a highlight of black. And the top tends to have more and the bottom less. So I will do the top first. This is the top of the eye. I haven't decided whether this is the left or the right eye. Obviously, if I were to make two eyes, I would have them symmetrically parallel to each other, so there'd be an exact duplicate of this eye next to this one. I would put the eye blinks exactly where they line up together, so the eyes blink together through time. In this case, I'm going to make it the left eye of the person looking this way, and that's why I'm putting the eyeshadow on this side. Notice the eyeshadow goes down and into these little wedge openings that are the eye blinks. I'm going to have to, as I'm pressing down, you can see I'm distorting the clay again toward gravity, toward the face or the surface of the table. And I'm going to add a little more eyeshadow to this. Again, it goes right into these eye blinks. That's why the eye blinks had to be carved before anything else happened. The eyeshadow has to go in next, because that's closest to the eyeball. Notice I'm going to flip this now. It doesn't mean I've changed anything. I'm just going to work on the backside, and it gives me a chance to re-pressure this back so it's more of a football oval almond shape one more time, and not so much of a mountain with a horizon line, a flat horizon on the bottom. Alright. We're almost done with the eyeliner, and then this animated eyelash will go in. And after the animated eyelash goes in, then the eye blinks themselves go in, and that's always fun, because you've basically you're burying motion into a block and building outside from the outside into that motion. Ooh, I missed something here. Glad I noted it. What's missing is of course, the lower eye blinks. And I have to put the lower eye blinks in before I put the eyeliner on, because I have to bury the motion into the block. So, I'm going to cut on every space where there's a blink. I'm going to cut again from below. The below cuts aren't as deep. I tend to think of the eyelids at the bottom of your eyes is coming in about 1/3 as far as the blinks that happen on the top of your eyelids. This is truthfully a place where you can go ahead and actually begin to cut your animation into sort of separate pieces. These pieces will begin to be glued back together again in a moment once the eyelashes and the lids actually go in. But in the short term, it's possible that you actually separate one part of the block from the other part in this process, and there's nothing wrong with that, is all I'm saying. It's to be expected, as long as you can keep track of where everything goes back together again in the end. Okay, now I've put the bottom blinks in. Blink, 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 blink. Here, the lower eyeliner gets laid, working on the left side of the eye, the left eye. I'm going to lay back in the eyeliner shadow, and then the eyelashes finally come along. Okay. A little more eyeshadow. I'm trying to roll it into each little divot because it has to go into the blink. It can't just be sitting up on the surface. It has to go down into each one of these little wedge-shaped valleys that have been cut so far. Great. Now all the basic parts of the blink have been done. Now it's time to put a little, since I'm on the bottom side of the eye right now, I'm going to go ahead and put the bottom eyelashes in first. Again, I don't put them all the way along. I just put, people don't have visibly eyelashes. They often get thinner and thinner the closer they get to this part of the eye, the less there's any eyelash here. And so I put the eyeliner on the back side, on this side of the eye. And the eyelash as well is not fully encasing the entire eyeball. It's only doing doing about 1/2 of the bottom lid, and it'll do about 2/3 or almost all of the top lid. It's good to leave a little bit open because it makes it a little more dramatic. It makes it more like a fine art sculpture. All right, finally, even before I jump to the other side, I'm going to go ahead and jump to the other side first. We're going to finally get I'm going to go ahead and do it. It's important eventually to start to put the eyelids in. Eyelids are sort of semicircular. I think of them as slices of oranges. If you look at that, that's sort of an orange slice. And you try to sculpt in a reasonably articulate. You know, clay is very, very mushy stuff, and so you have to work all you can to be as precise as you can be to get the edge really really put in there. Okay. Now, I'm doing these little wedge slices from what's the bottom of the eye right now, and these are the eye blinks. This last eye blink will be the biggest of all. These lower lids should only be about 1/3 as deep or big. This is the biggest eye blink, as you can see. I've added more thickness and made it the slowest, largest eye blink of all of the blinks. Okay. The good thing about this is it starts to glue the block back together again in a way where it's a little more manageable. It's not falling apart. Now I'm back to the top side of the eyelid, and I'm going to go the eyeball, and I'm going to go ahead and add the upper eyelashes, and I'm going to make sure I have the room for each of these divots now that go down and into the into the blinks. Yes, goes here, goes down here, it goes one last one here, and I'm going to cut just a tiny bit more of this texture because it's eyelash texture. It needs to roll around the entire length. Okay, that's pretty good. You can see, I'll give you a quick slice. I'm going to do it off this side. I've just flopped it. Now this would be the equivalent of looking at the right eyeball. But I'm going to give you a quick slice of what's developing here. Again, all the lashes are animating, as you can see, all the line textures. I'm going to put it back on this side so I don't lose my orientation. I'm done with the eyelashes, so I'm going to take the eyelash material away. Start to work with a little bit more of filling in the eyelids. Now these eyelids on the top, they're about 2/3 as deep as the ones on the bottom, so each one of these lids are going to be a little heavier. That's probably a little too heavy. I'll save that for the very last blink. Since clay is very mushy, you have to sometimes go in after every step, every process, you have to redefine the shape of what you were trying to get. So I'm actually trying to make a specific valley with a specific ledge that becomes the equal circle. Rather than being a mound, this is sort of a mound like here. I'm actually trying to make it a specific ledge. Feel free to use a tool to help you. You don't have to do it all with your fingers. These are the eye blinks, and I'm going to try to bring the cylinder part of the top of these hills to sort of a stasis, a place where it stops and doesn't just keep rolling mushy. There's plenty of mushiness in the whole process of strata cut, so you want to often get as much precision as you can. Part of the joy of it is what goes on in spite of your best effort to sculpt. Lots of strange and interesting things happen, and that's actually quite what makes it worth doing it this way and not in a computer all the time. You do want to see the morphic, hand-done, earth, mud, color shifting. It just does its own thing inside some of these smaller pieces. I think what I try to do when I sculpt is, when I make time blocks or sculpt time like this, is I try to give a good structural basis and then make sure that there's lots of textural activity. If you don't have textural activity and a lot of interesting, if you don't let clay be clay, you know, if you fight the material and you try to be too precise, you have to try to make too many fine cuts and too many really ultra detailed attempts. It's one reason why you want a good mix between solid colors and mixed colors or morphing colors. You don't want all of your colors to be solid because, except for purposes of example, sometimes I'll do that just to be clear. If everything is solid, you want to get that, Trim? If everything's solid, then it's not very interesting to look at. Thanks, Trim. On this eyeball, I put a lot of pressure on it from the top side down, so I'm going to go back in and push this side back up again. This will make it again an oval or a football shape and less of a mountain with a sharp, hard floor underneath that mountain. Now I've got to build quickly the support wedges. These are sort of like support triangles that go underneath the eyeballs. So the pressure won't distort it ever again. This is now sort of the last leg of finishing. There's many other things I could do, like I could add a little bit of pink or magenta right here, because often on the inside of an eyeball, I'll go ahead and do that. There's a little tear duct, you know, where eyes have a bit of a tear shape. So I'll just go ahead and put that in. It makes the eye not a complete almond. You know, there are little bits of human shape when you look at anatomy books. They're helpful when you're trying to come back to something as sloppy and gooey as clay. So having added this, it will make it less of a purely almond pinch and a little bit more of a blob with a little bit of a push down right there that kind of makes it a nice, it'll lead into the nose if I were to eventually put a nose with this, which we can talk about in a little bit. Alright, so I want a cradle. I'm building now the cradle that will support the eyeball from the pressure of the weight that comes down on it as I push down. And this cradle is sort of like it's like a counter. It's an outside shape that counters the weight of the support of the clay itself. So you see how it slides right in there. I'm creating the sort of negative shape that I want that eyeball to stay into. I'm going to try to rebox, if you will, the eyeball at this point. By reboxing, I mean I'm putting it into a place where now it can be handled pretty, what would you say, without a lot of care. It can be handled from this point on. It can be handled from this point on if I put the cradle in right, because I've, in a sense, boxed it out one more time, and boxes contain the animation inside them in a way that allows, let me show you what's going on from this view. You can see the box is, in a sense, two little sort of very skinny triangles on both sides of it to cradle the curve of the eye. And I'm going to leave this little tear duct, this little pink magenta tear duct I made, leave that exposed for now, because I think that, in a sense, I'm reverse sculpting the sort of mushiness of the clay to make sure that that is a distinct feature, that it doesn't actually sit inside the football or almond oval shape. It pushes out of that shape just a tiny bit, because this negative sculpting, this sort of flesh that's being added, now makes it really solid. Now I can push on it, and that's going to stay the shape I intended it to be, which is a semicircular. Again, I'm going to cut this side because it's got a little more of a tease on it. It has a little more of a front end. So that's going to be animated eyeball slice at the front. Blinks buried inside. To finish out this process, I'm going to have to encase the eyeball a little bit more. So it's all going to get basically pretty buried inside there and disappear. And if you were to look at it from the outside, once it's done, you really wouldn't see all the stuff going on inside of it. But it's kind of a important thing to understand how everything, when I think of what I need to do, everything gets built from the inside out. You know, I started with the very center, the little black iris. In the middle, I began much larger, sort of like this spindling thing. I began larger, and then I rolled that out, and as I rolled it out, I stretched it, and I kept twisting it to keep the animation going. I'm going to go ahead and finish blocking up this the top part of the shape, again, because you don't want it to be distorted either. When I begin to cut this for real, I do want to say one thing is, if I were to build a second eyeball on the other side of it, meaning if I were to have two eyeballs, one here and one here, I would have to build the second one for the eye blinks to sync up. So as I was burying this shape, I would be marking the clay, because I'm beginning to lose clarity on what's going on inside there. I'd be marking the clay on the outside to make sure that the blinks that are buried on the inside are still coherent, that I can not lose track of where they are. So often I will put little marks that will never show up in the animation, but allow me to sculpt. If I were to sculpt now a second eye, I would know these are the deep parts of the blinks that have to match up between the two eyes. And sometimes, let me go ahead and finish boxing. Okay, sometimes I would even add a little color to those shapes, so I could see them even more clearly. These little gouges, they'll only show up as little divots because they're the future blade will be cutting at this of an angle. It'll be cutting a tenth of an inch in this way all the way through this block like this. Ding, 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 ding. I could lay them in like this, or even smaller than this. This is kind of fast and crude. Here, this is even better. See how thin and tiny that is? It really almost doesn't show up when this is being cut sideways. No one's really going to notice if that shows up on a frame or not. It's just too small of an incident to see. But having put these in, I now can build an entirely second eye on this side, and I know where the blinks are, even though they're all buried now inside a bunch of clay that they've been blocked up and secure. The shape of the eyeball is secure because now I can hit it and be rough with it, and the distortion won't affect the animation on the inside. And the next steps would be to build the second eye, and then also to build the nose. And the nose, and this isn't really a nose, but this is an idea, I would then build a nose shape as its own piece, and then I would stick the two eyes together and start to put in clay that was the cheeks and other things. And I in clay that was the cheeks, and I would put the other eye in, and I would glue more clay or stick more clay in, and so it would become a single unit. A nose and two eyes would be this big unit, and then that unit would grow and grow, and I'd build the face around it. That's the process by which each piece, each individual component is sort of pre-built, and then they lock in together as extra components, and then you use marks on the side to calculate where you want any sync points to hit when you add other components to the first one. So you can do, this is the same principle as lip sync or words, and all of this can be in a sense pre-programmed within a few frames. It should sync up if you're paying attention and spending a little more time than I just spent to make this. Again, it's ready to be cut, and once you do, everything that's inside is very clean, it's very clear. The second eye would go here, the nose would go in the middle, and I would begin to sculpt more clay around each of it. I'd add more negative clay to make sure that the shapes that I wanted to maintain, I would box them in to make sure that they stayed clear and that they weren't becoming mushy. As you can see, in this shape I did it a bit sloppy, and it's taken on the wedge shape of the wedges. I didn't actually spend the time to actually smooth out the curves of the eye, and that's because the negative shapes, the boxing shapes, the flesh that went on all the sides of the eye wasn't as semicircular on this side as it should have been, because that's really how you maintain a shape, is by building outside negative shapes that make sure that the primary animation stays in the sort of general shape that you always intended it to be. One thing to note is that I liked, just like I have twice as much eyelash on the top in eyeliner, and maybe half or a third of the bottom is eyelash. I also, the eye itself could be subdivided, and you could almost say that 2/3 of the eye is at the top and 1/3 is at the bottom. I like to do that because I just think that fits the natural human eye. It tends to want to be a little more base heavy, or the hill of the eye wants to be a little higher than the base, and so there's a weight to the way the shape is made. That's sort of a 1/3, 2/3 weight, and it's divided right there in my mind when I'm trying to build it. That's why this is heavier, just like the way the eye blinks happened. The eye blinks were 2/3 off the top and 1/3 off the bottom. All right.